Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It's Geoff, Mosher, and Adam Caplan for Inside the Birds, presented by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. Well, Inside the Birds is back because Adam and I are back from Indianapolis, the NFL Scouting Combine. A lot to get into in this podcast from an Eagle standpoint, from an NFL standpoint, but I would definitely be remiss if we didn't start off just with a little sad note and very unfortunate. A colleague, former colleague of Adams at ESPN, and someone who's very well known and ubiquitous among sports reporters, Chris Mortensen, passed away. And man, it hurts this profession to see such a great guy, a gentle giant, pass away. And Adam, I know you had a chance to work with him, and you always, I only met him once or twice, so I can't say I know him, but you worked next to him, and you've always said great things about him.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. I told Mort this, and if I get emotional, please understand this guy was pretty influential in my career. So I told Mort when we first started working together at ESPN in 2013. I told him he was the inspiration for my career, and he kind of laughed. He kind of laughed it off, which is it's just the way he was. He's like, "Come on." I was like, "No, I'm telling you." And I brought up the story that did it for me. I was at a fantasy football convention in like 1997 or 98, and Dorsey Levens, the Packers running back, was maybe holding out or didn't report. And I said, "Hey, Mort, what's the latest on Dorsey Levens?" So he picks up the phone and he calls Ron Wolf, and I was just like the GM. Then I'm like, "This is unbelievable. How's he doing this?" I never forgot about that, and that was in the back of my mind. Man, boy, that's something cool. And then I remember just when my career started to take off a little bit in the late, 08, 09, I remember saying to myself, man, I'd love to work with him. He's such an honor, and it probably never happened. And then when it happened, I was just like in awe of it. And the other thing, he's two things that stood out about him. His humor, which I didn't know until I worked with him. I wouldn't know because we didn't know each other very well. But his kindness was the super cool thing. And you saw Sunday with some of the people work with him, where he got to know that he didn't work with, but how he loved our industry, as you were talking about. I mean, I could go through the texts that he sent me of encouragement. And one quick story I'll tell you before we move on. So I just started on a contributor's contract in 2013. I was not full time yet. I was working on a pretty significant draft story about someone who had an injury, and I need to get it confirmed. I was having a hard time getting it confirmed, and I called Mort, and he said, "I don't want my name on. I'm happy to help you." I was like, "Wow, this is super cool." I mean, like, how
Wow,
many people would do that for a guy you don't even really technically work with yet? It's the kind of guy he was, man. So it's such a
that's
wonderful
awesome.
human being. Yeah, it's tough. I had not seen him in a while, and yeah, he certainly was the number one inspiration for my career. Like no one even came close. He was the guy, and what a kind person.
Yeah.
That was the biggest takeaway of my time getting to know him.
Yeah. Definitely our condolences to the Mortensen family, to the ESPN family, and the bigger sports media family, everybody who's been, inspired or touched or just genuinely appreciated Chris Mortensen like the way we all did. And I'll say this, with Peter King retiring,
Yeah,
and Chris Mortensen obviously passing, our industry is just not as good as it can be. I mean, I think a lot of what you and I do here on Inside the Birds is shaped by people who came before us who were just more concerned about being right than being first, more concerned about being able to explain why a team is doing something or the Peter is a great storyteller. Peter may not break a
oh,
thousand things, but he
yeah.
gets inside and tells you exactly. You remember that story where he interviewed Sean Payton after the Eagles game, and Sean was saying, "Well, we were going right after Sidney Jones in the run game because we knew he wasn't going to tackle anybody." And so that was those two guys asked the right questions. They did their work hard. They wanted to make sure everything they wrote was rock solid. If it wasn't, they would have. It's very, very infrequent that they would get something wrong or be misled. So we try to do the same thing here on Inside the Birds, like those who came before us. The
Yeah,
best
two
do our
things here.
best.
Yep, two things. No question with Peter King. In fact, Peter's storytelling was just incredible. He was another one where like, how is he? Fuck, guys are going on the record and talking to him.
Yeah,
It's Andy Reid. You could just go back a couple decades when he started his Monday morning quarterback column, and he moved over to NBC, and Albert Breer took over for him. But one more thing on Mort, and this one was another one because I was so interested in contracts, and I remember talking to Mort about it. I called Mort Mr. Cash over Cap. He had a story. This is in like the '90s, and it was hard to get really good salary cap information. It was kind of technical, but he talked about cash over cap, how you could go over the salary cap, well over it. Like well, no, I'm sorry, you could spend more cash. You could spend way more cash over the cap
Mhm.
by contract structure. And the way he explained it, I understood it. It's just the way you structure your contracts. Yeah, the cap, yeah, you can't go over this year 255, whatever the number is, 255.6, but you could spend way more cash than that. It's just that they're both different. Cash is always going to be more important than cash, which is also going to be something what we talk about today. It's not even close. Cap is what you work around. Cash is everything. Talk to
Yes.
any owner or president. That's all that matters to them. They're not concerned about the cap. They're concerned about cash spending. And when Warren explained it, I was like, wow, this is like super cool. You never hear anything like this, That
Yep.
was really cool.
Yep. Cash is king, as they say.
Yep.
And Mort was a king in our industry. All right. So the Eagles were out in the Indianapolis at the combine. We were there. Andrew DeCecco was there. Had a lot of great content and coverage while we were there of things that were going on at the time. Obviously, we come back. We have to reconnect. We have to follow up. There's a lot of information to follow, and we'll start hitting that free agency news pretty hard as free agency is now right around the corner. In fact, as most people listen to this, they can say they are. Well, let's see. It's more than a week away, but obviously that
Exactly.
Monday the 11th, right, where the tampering period opens.
Yep. Next Monday. It's actually a week away. Free.
Yeah.
In fact, not only is it open, by the time it officially opens on March 11th, on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, all the top players are gone. So it's kind of like anticlimactic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a downer. We always laugh. We're like, wait, who's left on that Wednesday? So, although, it's funny you mentioned this because I went through Sunday. The quietest free agency I think Howie Roseman had in his career had to be last year. They didn't sign one front line free agent, not even close to it, really.
Yep.
And obviously, they trade 2 years ago at the draft at AJ Brown, but because they just coming off a Super Bowl appearance, and they didn't think they needed to go heavy. In fact, they walked away from some players. Javon Hargrave, the big one, and we'll talk more about this. On Thursday's show, we're going to start hitting free agency a little bit harder on Thursdays because we're only doing 2 shows a week now. But this one, free agency is going to be different than last year's. I promise you. It's not just because they have more cap space that helps, but that's not the point. The point is that they have so many holes that they have to address. Some for the long term. The draft is always about the long term. It has nothing to do with the short term. It's always about the long term view. Free agency is the short term view. They got both. They got short term and long term needs. There's a lot of work to be done here for this roster.
A whole lot of work. And good point to bring up right now, because as we get into that with Inside the Birds podcast, we also are continuing our series with Greg Cosell, the Intel with Greg Cosell, installment 3, which previews free agent linebackers, will be out today. And then the final installment, we're going to have that released later this week. We're going to do 2 in 1 week because we want to give you guys as much shelf life to absorb the content before free agency. Then, as Adam said, basically starts next Monday with all the news that'll come out. So we'll finish it up probably Friday, Thursday, I think will be, or Friday. One of those 2 days will be our last of the 4 free agency previews. And then week we'll recap free agency, some big signings with Greg, and then we'll get right into NFL draft preview for the next several weeks after that, all on the Inside the Birds platform. And look forward to talking to Greg Cosell about that. I know a lot of people have given us good feedback already, and they really want to know about the linebackers, Adam, because that's must be a thing about the Eagles to not have uncertainty at the linebacker spot. Andrew DeCecco, he'll have on InsideTheBirds.com this week a combine wrap up. He'll do his winners and losers, and pretty sure a mock draft 2.0, Eagles mock draft 2.0 from Andrew DeCecco will be out very soon. So make sure you're looking for that on InsideTheBirds.com. Along with our Patreon members, they are going to get a Discord chat on Wednesday night, 8 o'clock with Adam Caplan, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot for them to discuss. We did have an awesome Ask ITV live stream at the Combine. I think there were about 15 to 20 people on it. It was our most attended Ask ITV live stream ever, so had a great time. Looking forward to having everybody back for our next one in a couple of weeks as we recap some of the big free agent signings that'll undoubtedly have happened between now and then. All right, let's pause for a second to hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Adam, the bigger news from safety, the Eagles made a move that we said was coming. We knew it was going to happen. There was no way Kevin Byard, who they traded for at the deadline or right before the deadline, was going to play on the absurd number in the last year of his contract, right? So the Eagles released him. There was no guaranteed money left. There's no hit with this release on Kevin Byard, correct?
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with the cap. It's strictly cash. Nothing
Right.
to do with it. It's all cash. They save over 14 million in cash. Cap just over 13 million. The thing is cash here. They owed him 9.6 million in salary. He had a 4 million roster bonus, we're told, was due on March 17th. They were obviously not going to pay him that. He had some per game roster bonuses. The total was 14.1 million in cash. Cap is fluid every day. You could literally change. They have a ton of cap space, but that's not really important right now. They can do whatever they need to do, which is what we talked about a couple weeks ago. They'd be in okay shape. I've always said this. Joe Banner taught me this. You could actually have $5 million in cap space and sign 2 extensions if you want to by structure. So don't worry about it, folks. Cap is not a big deal. We don't talk about cap much because we know it's for this team. It doesn't matter. We keep an eye on it just to see if they're going to restructure any deals. But in the end, it's cash. Cash is king, as you said. It all really matters in this particular case. And I'm interested to see what they do here with Devontae Smith's contract and Landon Dickerson's. We'll talk more about this down the road. But from a cash standpoint, I've cleared up so much cash now, and then we'll get word on Kelsey. Kelsey has got the poison pills we reported months ago. He's got the same thing. He's got the big balloon cash due in June. So assuming he retires, he's got a little cash due that he's on the books for this season. And then of course Fletcher Cox we'll talk about in a second. I mean, this is the time to do it, man. The Eagles are the one team that does not wait. I mean, rarely do they wait to extend a contract. There's typically something like if the guy's had a lot of injuries and he's a young player, maybe they wait, but other than that, they get these guys done as soon as they're allowed to, which is after year 3, they extend.
Right. So the Eagles have no choice but to find safeties here in free agency, as we said, because now that I guess we talked about maybe there's a chance if they want to bring Kevin Byard back, which we did say there might be a chance, and there still could be, but you would have wondered if they want to try to work out a 1-year deal instead, which again, they can still work out. Perhaps you just let Kevin go out, test the market, see what there is for him. But if they want to bring him back, they still can. But we've also talked about guys out there from a veteran standpoint, like Eddie Jackson, who's already played in a Vic Fangio defense. But to me, when you look at what the Eagles have at safety right now under contract, which is just Sidney Brown, Reed Blankenship, Tristan McCullum, it begs for Howie Roseman to go get a young safety, someone who's probably going to be entering their second contract. Now, we were at the combine. We were both talking to a lot of people. It's hard to get a kind of a finger on the pulse of what they're doing. I did talk to some people who, who are involved with the safeties, and it's not like the Eagles' name came up a lot, but that doesn't mean anything for right now. Doesn't mean anything.
It's early,
right. They're early. They've got to be in a position though where they have to realize that Howie Roseman has to realize he needs to do something at this position.
So just so folks know, teams don't talk money now unless
correct.
There's an asterisk. Let's put it this way, both sides knew when it was that Byron Jones, because he was the #1 free agent. Everybody, both sides knew. Jones knew, and the Eagles knew kind of what the landscape was. We would learn as we reported then the teams that were in it, but that we didn't know that until the open period. It was that Monday, I think. Whatever, but I don't know what day free agency opened that year, but it was the open period where it starts 2 days before. We knew what the landscape was. We don't know. It's too early to know that with these teams. In fact, there's been, if you look for reporting out, there was nothing during the week. The only thing was that the people are, I'm following it too. I put some stuff out on Monday on Sports Grid on Justin Fields. There's nothing. Teams don't show their hand, and the agents are afraid to do it because they don't want to. They don't want to sell themselves short. So that's why you don't see a lot of information out there. But let me throw this out to you, because we said earlier that comparatively last year they're going to spend money. Did you get the feeling being out in Indy last week, just from talking to people around the league that you deal with, that know the Eagles pretty well, and Howie and whoever, you feel like it's going to be a pretty aggressive period for them?
I do. Yeah, I felt that going in. I still feel that now. like you said, it's hard to have that opinion validated when there's not a lot of numbers talked anymore at the combine. It's really just I feel like every team sits down with everybody just to kind of go through who they got, and then what you commonly hear is, all right, we'll call you when we get back home and we'll talk.
Yeah.
So you don't really know. In fact, you and I both know someone who has a pretty good safety who you'd think would get a pretty good deal and might, but it's not like we got the feedback that there's just a whole lot of buzz right now, and so you just don't know. Listen, we know the Eagles have to be aggressive. They have to make moves. They didn't hire these two coordinators, right, to just sit there and rebuild it back up. So but they've got to find the right fits. I don't think everybody fits what Vic Fangio wants to do specifically. So it may be a little bit harder to just say this guy works, that guy works. Now you have to be a little more selective. But I do get this. I still do get the sense Howie Roseman is going to be aggressive.
Yeah, and it could be in trade market, free agent market,
Great point.
signings and so forth. Yeah, I mean, it could come in a variety of ways. Howie's done that in the past. That's how he got Darius Slay on this team. So obviously AJ Brown. Free agency, folks, starts. Free agency counts when it's during the draft. By the way, just for your information, it does count. And free agency, by the way, is resigning your own players. That's a big thing that counts. That's you're spending your money. So we'll see what happens here, but this defense is going to look different, folks. From schematic, yep, hell yeah. And once again, they had 5 starters last year that were new. We'll see how many different are going to be different, and particularly in the back end, the back 7. It could look a lot different.
Yeah, no, good point on the trade market too. But I remember 2 years ago when the Eagles clearly needed to get a wide receiver, and we're at the combine and we're talking to people, and there were a couple of names that we found out the Eagles would have interest in, just to what level. I think Allen Robinson was one of those names, right? But we were never getting that slam dunk definite and even with A-Rob, he was a nice receiver, but he was a veteran. We thought the Eagles would be like really aggressive onto somebody young, like second contract guy, and it didn't happen until draft day when they got AJ Brown.
All right. So Allen Robinson,
Mhm.
talked to him I forgot to put in my notes. So I talked to him. So he was hosting on NFL radio. I did a segment on with him on the Fantasy Channel. So I asked him. I said, "Hey, I know that you were going to sign with Eagles, or you're close, or it was in the works." So I said, "Do you mind if I bring this up?" He said, "Absolutely, go ahead." And he said, "Yeah, look, I'm going to have to talk about this kind of stuff if I'm going to be hosting here." I'm like, "Yeah, exactly, good call." So I asked him. He said it was definitely between the Rams and the Eagles. And here's the funny thing, and I didn't have time to follow up. He said, "Yes, it was. It was. He seriously was considering the Eagles, and he didn't know how good the Eagles would be. He signed with the Rams because he thought he had a better chance to win the Super Bowl. Because were the Rams in 21 in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think they were, right? That was the year they
Okay.
won, I believe. I'm getting no, isn't that the year Tampa Bay won? I forget. Now I don't remember.
But they were looking better. No one knew. I mean, the Eagles got in the playoffs in Nick Sirianni's first year,
Hmm.
but no one really knew. And he said, yeah, it was definitely close. It was between those two teams. So that what we had said then. Oh, now he got a better contract. My sense is back then also the money was different. I didn't get into it with him, but I know back in our reporting then the Eagles were not close to what the Rams offered him. So whatever. But
Yeah, yeah.
as we kind of laughed, they didn't get Allen Robinson. That worked out well. They didn't get Calvin Ridley. That worked out well, and they got AJ Brown. Wow.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, and that worked out really, really well. And that actually, now that we run through this and everything starts to make more sense, that's also the year the safety from New Orleans, Marcus Williams, was a free
Yes.
agent. And I believe when we came back from the combine and did some reporting, we said we heard that there was some interest there, but like it was hard at that point to know the extent of the interest because, like I said, not a whole lot gets discussed other than who you got. We might be interested. We had no idea at that time that the Eagles were going to really like ratchet up the offer. And what we later found out was that they were very, very competitive with the Ravens to get Marcus Williams. And Marcus just decided he wanted to go to Baltimore instead of Philadelphia. It was almost the same offer from what we understood.
Actually, not only did the Eagles match it, they took it one. In fact, what happened was before he signed the contract, they actually called back
Mm-hmm.
and were willing to offer him more money, but he verbally agreed, and you can't back out. So honestly, they could have had him.
Right.
But and that was in fact, I don't have it in front of me. I know there was only like 1 million a year less than Reddick got, which is incredible. I think he got
Yeah.
14 million a year.
Right.
Marcus won something like that. So yeah, and look, don't forget, listen to the Intel with Greg Cosell are we already did the safeties, so those are up there, so you could hear about those free agent safeties.
100%. One last thing on the contract before we get on to the Fletch is there's some curiosity around Devontae Maddox. I mean, here's a guy who has enters the last year of the deal in his extension, Adam, and he has not been healthy, and you wonder if he goes the Kevin Byard route where the team feels like, no, we just can't bring you back at that number. He's also someone whose guaranteed money is up, if I'm not mistaken, so it would not cost them, I don't think, whether it's cash or cap. If they would save money if they released him, but they have to decide whether they want to do that and leave themselves as thin as they would be at the nickel spot. When healthy, he is a good player. He just not healthy very often.
It can't just. I mean, I just you can't justify him at just under 7 million in cash. You just can't. I mean, he's just a really good player when healthy. Very one of the top nickels.
Right.
Love the guy. Had been a. And this is one after reporting back in 2018. It was everyone with the Eagles and wanted this guy. Like universally, it's rare for front office. We're talking about non-first or second round picks. With Amatu was a fourth rounder. That they all like this is our guy. Like whatever they red star, blue star, whatever the hell they call it. Teams have a code for it. Where they all agree, and he was that guy. He's been a good story development, but yeah, he's still on the roster. Again, it doesn't. They're not. If they cut him, it has nothing to do with cap. It would be cash. Cash justification, I'm told, is the term when clubs look at this, and you justify paying this guy this kind of money. And that's really what it comes down to. It's can you do nothing to do with a cap or anything else. You just isolate the player. It's the production comparatively to the injury history worth keeping him on the roster. And again, the money is just it's too rich. It's a question how do they want to bring him back at a lower number? Do they offer him that or just cut him outright? Those are the decisions there, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would have a feeling that a decision on that will be coming pretty soon around the corner here. And it probably doesn't help Avante. This is a good draft for corners who have inside outside versatility. We will talk about that more with Greg Cosell as we get in, but there's a lot of well-built corners who have good. I mean, everybody ran under a 4.4. It's the amount of guys who ran under 4.4 at the wide receiver and cornerback position were ridiculous. But that doesn't mean you can play. It just means you're fast. But still, there were. As we asked around, a lot of people feel that it's a good corner, but it's also a good versatile corner draft. So you can always, draft a guy and hope to get him into your defense, starting off as a nickel and then moving him outside. And it does, strangely, we'll have to see what the fate of James Bradbury is. Howie seemed very, I don't know, he seemed very adamant at the microphone that James Bradbury was going to be an Eagle this coming year, but I am a skeptic of that, Adam.
I was laughing. I was talking to someone with another team about its Eagles roster. I said, "What do you think of Bradbury?" He goes, "Oh, how could they keep him?" And this guy had seen the Eagles tape. I said, "Well, I know if I'm the general manager, there's no way I'm going to let it out that I'm going to cut him. I'm going to say, oh, he's on our team going forward. Oh yeah, he's under contract. Of course, that's what he's going to say.
Right.
I said, oh, you know what? We should have benched him. He really fell off. And by the way, we want everyone to know we're going to cut him. No, of course, he's not going to say that. So yeah, it would be stunning if he's on the team. I know they owe him just under 11 million, fully guaranteed, based on all the cash they owe him. It's just there's no cap saving if they cut him. Here's the problem: they're going to be out of June 1 designations based on a couple things that are probably going to happen. So it's just, I guess for now, he's going to kind of get the roster anyway. You could just keep him. Maybe towards the draft, you could find anyone. As I said on a previous show, maybe if you can get a 7th round pick that is conditional to a 6th based on playing time for somebody, and maybe you pay 75% of the cash that's owed just to get them off the roster.
Yep.
Yeah, we see this happen, so we'll see.
And that's exactly right there why you don't say, no, I'm definitely parting ways with James Bradbury,
exactly.
just in case someone's willing to get right. Just in case. You never know.
Sure.
All right, let's talk about Fletcher Cox, Adam. We've talked about his future. We know people around him have been saying, can't quite tell if he's going to come back, or it doesn't feel like he's coming back. And I know there was an ESPN report that basically said he's going to retire.
Expected to, yeah.
Expected to retire, yeah.
Yeah, what we heard coming out of Senior Ball, it sounded like he was probably going to retire, but there was nothing official. Howie Roseman, Eagles GM, did say he's going to give Cox and Kelsey time to make their decisions. They're okay with it. Take whatever time that they need. So here's the deal with his contract. He's got what's called a placeholder salary this season of 1.5 million. Just like just like BG does. It's called a placeholder number. Obviously, if he was coming back, he's not playing for 1.5 million. So the way the contract was structured is to allow for a post June 1 release in this year. He's got 3 void years. So they're prepared for this. Now, if he decides he wants to play, boy, did he play well last season. And he was a leader, no question about it. They love to have him back. But if not, it's the 2 young kids, and it would even put more pressure on Jordan Davis in his 3rd year. Boy, did he regress in the second half. He is, let's call it like it is. He's been a disappointment. You see flashes, the weight,
Oh, 100%.
getting stood up, not acceptable. Got to be better.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on the team for 2 years and he's probably played 8 good games. That's not acceptable. Not at all for a first round pick that you traded up for. So yeah, year 3 doesn't. By the way, year 3 doesn't just have to be like you got a little bit better year. I mean, he has to make a big jump, and really, it's just about conditioning. When he is in good conditioning, he plays well. Those first few games, he looked like a monster when he was well conditioned. I know it's a big if, but he just needs to get his conditioning and his weight right. And I have a feeling he can make that jump, but he's got to show it, got to prove it.
Yeah,
can't be incremental. After year 3, you can't say, you know what, he got 30% better. We're building something here. No, doesn't work that way.
He needs to have a breakout season, whatever that looks like. Not just flash plays, which he did occasionally in the first half. Now, if Fletcher Cox retires, it's Davis, it's Carter, Milton Williams is the 3rd, who's in the last year of his rookie deal. Boy, is he a good player. Been a great story of development. Pelotu and the reserve future deals. Well, more Joma, I should add, as well. So the good thing is, look, this brings us to our next segment. Is this team in transition? We brought this up 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then Howie Roseman talked about how it's a good thing to play younger players, and we knew that when this staff came in 21, or what's left of the staff in 21, from 21, they focused on player development, not so much last season, and which is sort of understandable because they had to play a lot of different players because of injury, and a couple guys should have played earlier. Sidney Brown should have played earlier. He did not. But they played a lot of young guys that they knew they had to play because they just didn't have the depth. But going forward here, I see nothing wrong with playing a lot of young players. I mean, they typically over the years have not been willing to do that a lot. But man, why not do that now and get a good look at these young guys?
I was thinking about that. I agree with it. Real quick, I just want to put a bow on this last thing with Fletcher Cox. Does he strike you? This is now just educated guess, not reporting anything, haven't heard anything, but he played so well, as you mentioned last year, for a guy who's going to retire, and for a guy who's, way into his 30s. You wonder if because there's now this trend of guys who just wait until late November, right, to sign with a team as they kind of ring chase. And I wonder if Fletcher Cox, and I only ask this because of how well he's played the last few years, even as he gets up there in age, does it benefit Fletch to just, stay in shape, do what you got to do, and then when someone calls you in November, hop aboard, like Sue and Linval Joseph did with the Eagles 2 years ago, and somebody else, a couple of guys did that this past year with other teams too.
If he does indeed retire, we'll see. I mean, if he does, he turns 34 in December. You remember he had a chance to go elsewhere to Cleveland, and other teams were interested in him, and he got a 1 year fully guaranteed 10 million last season. He wanted to be back. He loves living here. I know that from talking to people close to him. He loves it. And even other agents know that. It's pretty interesting. One guy who's got a defensive player told me, he goes, "Oh, guy, this Fletcher Cox, he told my guy how much he loves it here. He never wants to play anywhere else." And
okay, yeah. Well, never wanting to play. That's pretty strong then. So maybe he would only do that for the Eagles and not enough. I was thinking, would he do that for any team that's got like 11 wins in November and they call him up and it's like, man, we had an injury, we could use you for depth or whatever, and
yeah, I don't know him, so only he would know. That's right. Again, we're extrapolating a lot of information because this is stuff only he knows.
Right.
But it's an interesting talk because we saw Linval Joseph do it off the couch with Ndamukong Suh. That was pretty amazing. Particularly Joseph, like, who knew? So we'll see what Fletch does, but this team's going to get younger, folks. How much younger remains to be seen. We'll see what happens over the next week or so, actually 2 weeks. when the broader part of free agency happens, and then get closer to the draft and the draft, what they do there, because there's nothing wrong with turning the page. I'm looking forward to seeing what the GM does here with this roster.
I agree. Let's talk about how they can get younger. First, whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help you do all three. Say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you'll love, delivered right to your door. So you've resolved to sit down and eat dinner around the table, but what do you do about those nights when your schedule is jam-packed? That's when you turn to HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, and that includes their 15-minute recipes designed to help you minimize mealtime stress. That is our kind of meal. Every time we eat HelloFresh meals, whether it's a quick and easy one or their standard meal, we're blown away by the freshness, taste, and overall quality. So many great options to choose from: chicken, steak, seafood, vegetarian meals, anything you want. And now they've got a great breakfast deal. If you go to HelloFresh.com/Eagles free, you use the code Eagles free, you'll get free breakfast for life. That's one breakfast item per box while you have an active subscription. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/Eagles free. And you use the promo code Eagles free, all one word, lowercase EAGLESFREE. Act now for America's #1 meal kit. So I was thinking about the 2017 Super Bowl team and how he built that basically on the tenets of getting younger, especially on defense, right? You know, they were building around Carson Wentz. They needed to bring in a veteran receiver or two. So they got Torrey Smith and they got Alshon Jeffrey. But on defense, Adam, you know, they make the trade for Ronald Darby. He was a second contract guy. He was about to enter his second contract. They got him from the Bills after year 3, I want to say. They brought in safeties, McLeod and Jenkins, Malcolm Jenkins. You know, at linebacker, they brought in Nigel Bradham. I can't remember if he was a free agent or if he was a trade, but he was another guy who was 3 or 4 years, I believe, in the league. Not old, not young, right in that sweet spot for a guy to come into his prime. And then they were getting younger up front as well, but they didn't mind bringing in like a veteran like Chris Long on a 1-year deal, while they were also bringing in Tim Jernigan, who was about to be on his second contract. So to answer your question, yes, the Eagles do and can get younger while still fielding a very competitive team.
Yeah, so in that 17 team, they signed Jeffrey in free agency. Torrey
Mhm.
Smith was cut by the Niners, so you had 2 veterans. Jason Peters obviously was still there from the acquisition many years ago from Buffalo, but Sayamala was their young guy, developmental guy. They signed Brandon Brooks at free agency. So Zach Ertz was in the middle of his career. Lane was in the middle of his career. Wentz was their young quarterback. So it's a mixture of older players. You mentioned Chris Long was cut by the Patriots. Cox in the middle of his career. Timmy Jernigan was acquired via trade.
Mhm.
They got mileage out of him. Bradham was, by the way, free agent, to answer your question.
Right.
Jordan Hicks was only in his 3rd year. He was a draftee. Michael Kendricks was in the middle of his career. Jalen Mills was young in his career. 2 great signings at safety. Wow. McLeod and Jenkins. Is it getting any better than that?
No,
I mean,
it does not.
phenomenal. And then the one nobody expected, because he sucked for a couple weeks at training camp, that's Patrick Robinson. The Colts cut him, I think, and then he came in, formerly of the Saints and the Colts. And out of the blue, he becomes one of the best slots in the NFL. And you remember who got hurt? I think, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Ron Brooks get hurt? We rarely talk about him over the years. Didn't he get hurt? Ron Brooks, remember that
It's very
one?
possible.
Yeah.
I thought Ron Brooks came after the Super Bowl year, but I don't remember.
No,
He might
he actually
have.
did. No, that's if I'm not mistaken, that's why they acquired Ronald Darby.
Oh,
Brooks got hurt. Pretty certain.
you might be right. I mean, they were sort of bare anyway because Brooks was a slot, right? And Darby helped play the outside.
He was, but they were very light, and they didn't know about Mills because he didn't run all that well. He's a pretty smart guy. Remember, Sidney Brown was not ready in his rookie season. He was on NFI,
Mm-hmm.
but they were light. And maybe Robinson replaced Brooks. That's a good point. But they ran out of corners. They just didn't have anyone. And it became a point because remember Jalen Watkins, they were trying to figure out what he was. Remember
Yeah,
was he
they
a
had
corner?
him and
Was he
Rasul
safety?
Douglas sort of
Yep. Cool.
platooning
He had to play. Yeah.
because Darby actually got hurt and missed 10 games. I think people forget about that. He was supposed to be the missing piece. They trade for him. He missed 10 games, and they actually platooned Rasul Douglas as a rookie with Jalen Watkins at times, and they held the fort down until Darby was able to come back.
They had to make that trade. They just didn't have enough bodies at any corner spot. So, and it's funny. I look at that roster, and it's some of these guys they were cut before training camp, and then some guys made it. Destiny Vallejo, you might remember him. Who didn't it was a backup D tackle.
Mhm.
Justin Hamilton was on a ton of teams. And Bo Allen started the season on NFI. Then, of course, he'd become very integral. It was good to see him at the Super Bowl. So yeah, Howie did a good job of mixing young players with veterans, and that's really been Howie's story when he gets it right. Signing or trading for the right free agents, he's excellent at free agency. And you have to give the pro personnel department credit. Look, it doesn't always work. We know
Yeah.
that. It's really the draft, and they're going to get younger folks. It's not only what they're going to do at free agency, where they have holes, but for the future, they still have a lot of work to do. They've got a good young core here. If you look at 27 or older, is really the sweet spot. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Mailata turns just 27, believe it or not, though he's been in the league since 18. Landon Dickerson, Jurgens, Hurts, Milton Williams, Davis, Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat turns just 27, believe it or not. CD Brown, of course, ACL, Reed Blankenship, and the young kids, the young backups, they're not going to be starters, and Nolan Smith, of course. So, look, this is a decent young core, but they still have a lot of building to do.
Right. So Howie did say, and we talked about this last pod, he said the green light is on for Nick Sirianni to get these younger players on the field. So that means guys we just talked about. It means Jordan Davis. It also means Jalen Carter, who did not start last year, but he's got to be a starter in year 2.
Played a lot though.
Yeah, he did play a lot.
Definitely.
He's got to play more in year 2 as long as he can, keep up that pace of snaps. And Nolan Smith, you've got to see more from Nolan Smith up front. It doesn't even matter about Hassan Reddick coming back or not. He's just got to be able to play more snaps and make more production in year 2. They got to figure out a way to get him on the field if he shows that he can handle that workload increase and still be impactful. But that's the coach's job. Coach him up, get him out there. Their first round picks, get them going. And now you've got a lot of new coaches, including a new defensive line coach.
Yeah, that's right. And then, by the way, and to close the show, we're going to go over these contract updates. These, not all of them, but most of them are reserved future deals. Wow, they really feel good about these guys' ability to be back into the roster players. Where the back end of the roster was, to say it wasn't good enough would be an understatement. This is interesting. The kind of guarantees that they're giving out to these guys are going to be on the back of your roster if they make it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So this has kind of been their MO. They're doing things that most teams are not doing. They're giving street free agents decent guaranteed money where you go, wow, this guy's going to make it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, free agents and futures contracts guys. Yeah, they're giving him more money than you would normally expect. We'll get into that in a second. Just finish it off. I think linebacker and safety and maybe even corner. We'll see how they approach the corner position, Adam. But I'm looking at guys who are in that 25 to 27 range, meaning they played a couple of years, they're experienced, they may have familiarity with the scheme or not, but they're not old, they're not on the downside, they're right in that sweet spot, that second contract, and they don't all have to be superstars. I don't expect the Eagles to go out and give $1 billion to who's the top linebacker, Patrick Queen, probably.
That's not.
Yeah, they're not.
That's not something you would think would be on the radar based on the history of the last 20 years of.
Right. Who's the guy you love? Luvu, right? Frankie Luvu.
Oh, I love Frank. We're going to talk about Frankie Luvu. He's one of my favorite players. He unless you really follow the NFL, he's with the Panthers.
Right.
Kind of come out of nowhere and been like a quiet star obviously he's been on some bad teams, but he's really underrated. The Panthers, as I understand, are doing everything they can to bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk to Cosell about him later today when we do that show, or next whenever we're doing the linebackers. But yeah, and
he'll get a high end deal. Is my point though. He's the
type
of guy that will not be in the price range most likely for the Eagles. I don't know. Maybe things change, but historically that has not been the type of guy.
No, they've really well. I mean, they did pay Bradham decent coin, for a free agent, but that on your point is true. But there's always time to change though. We talked about 2018 when we first started the show that when they were going to draft McCaffrey, had he been there, It's a complete departure. They've never done it in the history of the franchise. They've never drafted a pure running back. Byers is not a pure running back. They've never drafted a pure running back in the first round, and that was if they were going to do it with McCaffrey. So
Right.
you never know. But yeah, I would agree with you. The chances of them trusting Patrick Queen are like 0.0001.
Right.
It's not what they do.
Shoot, I hope they do, to your point about changing, because it would give us something fresh and new to talk
Oh,
about with this position. It would be great for
it'd be so
content. I
awesome.
mean, it would
I
be
would
holy cow.
because I know every year, you talk safety, you want them to draft a safety in the first 2 rounds, and we're always like maybe someday, maybe someday. Did Nate Allen second round? We'll talk more about draft stuff in a couple weeks when we go strictly to the draft. We transition to the draft, but this is going to be a fun off season. I'm telling you, folks. This is going to be. It's just going to be interesting to see what the composite of this roster here. We just mentioned the younger players, 27 or younger, which is important. It's the way teams look at it. They've got a lot of work to do here, and they've got a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of these contracts you were getting to, futures deals and street free agents that you were just alluding to. First, I want to pause real quick to hear a word from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you hop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. All right, a lot of names that the Eagles have brought in over the last few weeks since the end of the season. There's the running back, Ty Davis-Price. We mentioned him from San Francisco. Austin Watkins, the receiver. Shaq Davis, wide receiver. Tight end, E.J. Jenkins. The offensive lineman, Darian Kennard. We talked about him a little bit, coming over from Kansas City. And, of course, veteran offensive tackle, LaRaven Clark. So, Adam, as we look at those 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in particular, a couple of things really stand out with guaranteed money. Which one do you look at and you're like, whoa, hey, that's pretty interesting?
Boy, they're all. I just look at they used the full guarantees are anywhere from these guys from 150. Austin Watkins is a guy I know they're excited about. He's going to be a back end player, but he's done some decent things in preseasons in the NFL. They gave him 2 years, 1.83 million, 150 fully guaranteed at signing. The Shaquan Davis, Shaq Davis, if you will, if you really follow college football, 2 years, just under 2 million, 225 fully guaranteed at signing. See, to me, when you're giving these guarantees out, you clearly think other teams involved. You're like, you're not getting them. Like to the other teams, that's just what it says to me. My favorite one though, because the guy he's a better fit for a pure zone like the Niners. Well, the Niners did a little gap, I'm told, but mostly it's still zone. You one cup get upfield. Ty Davis-Price, 225 fully guaranteed of his 1.1 million. And he gets a 50 grand for being on the roster game one, we're told. I look at these, even E.J. Jenkins, who's probably not going to make the team, but they gave him 20 grand fully guaranteed in a signing bonus. But the guy that you did a good job of outlining from your sources on Darian Kennard, he got the biggest guarantee of all of them, 300 grand fully guaranteed. He not all of them signed 2-year deals. 2-year deals. Watkins did, Shaq Davis did, Jenkins did, Ty Davis-Price did not. Kennard did. He got 300 grand fully guaranteed on his 2-year deal. LaRaven Clark, he's back for 1 year, 175 fully guaranteed out of his 1.26 million. All these signings tell you what does it really mean that they think these guys are going to make it. These guarantees are obviously you're not always going to be right, but they think enough of these guys that they want to develop them. So
Yes.
and the back end of the roster is not very good, and that's part of their collapse is not having guys who come in when other guys are struggling.
How about 225,000 fully guaranteed on a $1.1 million contract for Ty Davis-Price? That's basically what, 25% of his salary is guaranteed? I mean, that's pretty big right there for a guy, who's you just got off the street like that. That's like you said, that shows you something.
Yeah, I mean, so the breakdown is 150 of his base salary of 985,000 is fully guaranteed, and the rest he got, I believe, in a signing bonus, and then he gets that little $50,000 roster bonus for being active on game for being actually on the roster on the 53-man roster week 1. So if he makes it, he gets the 50 grand. So yeah, they clearly think he can make it. And if you really look at the Eagles situation running back, there's such an opportunity because Boston Scott, who changed agencies, he is up. Kenny obviously won't be back. How could he possibly be back after last season? Kenny Gainwell's up. Excuse me, is on the final year of his deal. And then Swift is up. And then the only guys under contract now are Gainwell, Lou Nichols, who you had good information on our last show, and Ty Davis Price. So they clearly felt good about Ty Davis Price. And you don't, just so you folks understand, typically when you give a nice guarantee, you have a hit. Either you like this player for that draft when he came out 2 years ago, someone in their personnel department must have liked them. You just don't say, "Oh, here's a dartboard. Let's throw this one and sign this guy." That's not the way it works. You have good information on the guy that you felt really good for him about him. So let's see what happens here. I mean, Lou Nichols was also drafted in the 7th round by the Packers. Ty Davis Price is a fairly high round. Was he 3rd rounder a couple years ago? So here we go. We'll see what happens if these guys could contribute.
Let me ask you this. So when they count the salary cap, it's only really the top 51 salaries on your team, correct? So a lot of these guys who are getting guaranteed money don't fall in that, correct? They're not among the top 51?
Yeah, I don't know yet because it's not something I'd be looking at right now, but yes. So every salary for the season counts. Everyone on the 53 in the practice squad, every single salary, even IR guys count in the fall, but only the top 51 count before that. So we'll take a look. We have access to that, so we'll look at it when it matters. After when we're 2 weeks into free agency or so, we'll recalculate what the cap looks like for them.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that means if that makes the Eagles smart for then guaranteeing money on contracts that aren't in the top 51 because it doesn't hurt them as much, right? If the player doesn't, it doesn't count against your cap, or it's really just a cash issue at that point. No,
it would. No, the guarantee would count if they cut these guys. I mean,
if they cut them, yes, that they cut them.
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
full
that makes sense.
Whatever was fully guaranteed, whether it's a signing bonus, base salary. Rarely do you see them. In fact, I've never seen them fully guarantee a roster bonus for a guy that was not, was signed to a future deal or just a low end free agent.
Right.
But man, I've not seen this in 31 other teams. So many guys getting fully guaranteed money, and it's one thing because every team does it now in recent years after the draft with undrafted free agents. These are guys that were either cut by the former team or not brought back on a reserve future deal. Yet the Eagles saw so much of these guys, and again, someone or more than one person liked these players with their pro personnel department, or again, maybe for the college. They liked him, or maybe they leading up to a game last season, maybe they saw some tape, or the Chiefs. He was there. Was Kennard drafted a couple years ago in 21?
Yeah, 2 years ago, I believe. Yeah,
22. So whatever the case may be, they obviously have tape that they liked.
Yeah. One guy that we talked about, not on this list, but we did talk about him a couple of weeks ago, was Jacob Harris. Is another guy who signed a futures deal, but got a pretty good signing bonus for it. One of the things I learned about him out of the combine, Adam, is that he can also punt. This guy was already appealing, right, because of his size, and he's one of those tight end wide receiver hybrids who runs really fast, has great size, has great speed, athleticism. I think the Rams were the team that drafted him, and he was with Jacksonville last year. But yeah, with the Rams, I was told he was doing so. He was a backup punter, may have also been that with Jacksonville. So he can give you that if you get an injury in a game and he happens to be active. And he was used a lot with the Rams in practice, at least, as orbit motion kind of guy, gadget kind of player. You don't often hear that out of a tight end, but again, he's sort of got that tight end wide receiver versatility and is a great athlete.
So here's what I saw. I was at their camp, the Rams camp in 21. Although they're moving now, but they were at UC Irvine, and he was a slot tight end. And I'm like, who is this guy? Because he was just a jumbo receiver, but he could move. So they'd line him up in the slot, and no one could cover him. He was a super freak athlete. And when the Eagles signed this guy, I was so excited. I know he tore his ACL during his rookie season. He never quite was the same, and they wound up cutting him, waiving him. And then they brought him back to their practice squad. He never really contributed. As you said, he's with Jacksonville last season, but I am intrigued by this signing. We'll see if he has anything.
Yeah,
Still
it's
a
a
young
fun.
guy.
Yeah, it's a fun number 3 competition with him, Calcaterra, Alberto. I mean,
Good.
it's good. It's gonna be one guy is super athletic, another guy who's Calcaterra. He's shown some things at times, but obviously he had a concussion again last year. You don't know where he's at. He really wasn't productive as a player last year. And then Alberto, who really is banking on, they signed him to a 1-year deal to hope that he could do better than he did last year. So it should be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So lots
All
of
right.
roster shakeup here and additions.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So listen out for the intel with Greg Cosell, and then Thursday we'll be back with Inside the Birds. We'll get it that much closer to free agency, and then the next one will be the next Monday. And yeah, we're gonna really start to get rocking and rolling with the intel. That's gonna do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.